Hi, I'm Sigmund Brouwer, the author of Saffire. And in Saffire, you're going to meet a cowboy named James Holt. Here's where he's from, Medora, North Dakota. And that hotel is much like it would have been in the 1900s, early 1900s, when he was living there. Beyond the hotel in Medora, you would have seen the hills of the Badlands. Then it would have looked just the same as now. And leaving Medora would take you out into a vast grasslands. Throughout the story, these are the grasslands that Holtz refers to as he talks about his ranch and the daughter that he's left behind. As you can see by this photo, someone else fell in love with the same Badlands. And when Teddy Roosevelt was there, he was not there as president. It was long before he became president. These were the lands that Teddy Roosevelt fled to try to handle the grief at losing his wife and his mother in the same day. It was here that James Holt first met Teddy Roosevelt. Now, I'm talking about James Holt as if he's real, and to me he was. And in the novel, you'll discover a few other people who did come to life from the pages of history. First, of course, was Teddy Roosevelt, who played a major role in the building of the canal. He was the one who said, "Let the dirt fly." And fly it did. Holt arrives in Panama at the top of your screen, right above Gatun Lake. Here's the country he has to traverse as he heads down, finally to Panama City. And the story opens here at the Culebra Cut. See, it doesn't do any justice to how wide and huge that cut was, but Holt begins the story overlooking this cut. And I hope Holt's first-person narrative gives you a sense of how amazing the project was. The huge steam shovels, the men on the trains shoveling the dirt off the trains here into the lake to help build the dike. And later, the building of the gigantic cement blocks that form these canals. And as you'll discover in the story, from real life, Colonel George Washington Goethals was put in charge of the entire project. And he's the one given most of the credit for the final third of the building of the canal. What fascinated me, as you'll see in the author's notes, so I'm sorry to repeat it if you've already read that, was the fact that every Sunday he would hold court like King Solomon. It didn't matter your rank, didn't matter who you were, you could see him in the order of when you got there. And that's where the story opens. And if you read the author notes, you already know this too. There was a man named T.B. Miskimon whose job was to sit in on those meetings, take notes, and report back to Goethals on anything that Goethals couldn't deal with immediately. I was so fascinated by this footnote to the history of the building of the canal that I ended up going to Wichita State University and also to Georgetown Universities, where I was able to read many of the letters, the original letters that T.B. Miskimon wrote during his reports. So first, with thanks to Wichita State University, I was able to use some of those letters in the story. And after spending hours and hours reading through those letters and trying to get a sense of who this man was, T.B. Miskimon, I had so much fun introducing him to the fictional character James Holt. But I confess, all along the way, it didn't even occur to me to wonder what TB stood for in the name T.B. Miskimon. I'd gotten so wrapped up in the story that as I wrote it over the course of 9 or 10 months, the first draft, I just kept calling him TB. And it wasn't until I'd finished that first draft, gone through the second and third draft, and then many more drafts with the help of my editor, that I started to wonder what TB stood for. And it was fun to go back into the story and have Holt ask T.B. Miskimon the same question. And as you'll discover as you read the story, Miskimon does not give him the answer. So that led to some real-life sleuthing, if you can call it that, perusing genealogy boards, going through old newspaper accounts, until very slowly, one by one, I tracked down more of T.B. Miskimon's life, and I found out where his gravesite was. And it was in the historic town of Harpers Ferry, West Virginia, at, as you can see, the Harper Cemetery. What I knew for sure from a previous cross-reference in the Panama Canal records was that his first name was Thomas, but I didn't know his middle name. And if I found his gravesite, maybe I'd finally learn it. It's been a little over an hour on a peaceful Memorial Day Monday. Harpers Ferry Cemetery, overlooking the Potomac, and where you can see the river is just downstream from where the Shenandoah meets it. I just want to show you what it looked like as I was walking around, wandering among this ancient cemetery from Civil War times, looking at headstones like this. And you know, if I would have come in from the other direction, those four right in front of me would have had a lot more significance. It's the clue I should have seen first, but I didn't. T.B. Miskimon's mother, Ella Miskimon, May 17, 1854 to December 10, 1921. And over here, we have a Thomas W. Beale, married to Julia Ann. And this is Thomas's grandfather, Thomas W. Beale, the daughter Ella Beale, who married, and it's too bad you can't see it, married the Reverend Miskimon. And here's Thomas's brother, son of Reverend Henry Edward Miskimon and son of Ella Marie Beale Miskimon. And you have to wonder, at least I wonder, why would Edward Miller Miskimon be set there with mother and father in the center, grandfather on the far side, and then here's what I found first after that little over an hour of walking. T.B. Miskimon, Thomas Beale Miskimon, 1871, 1928. And then finally, I had it. Thomas Beale Miskimon. But that's not quite the end of the story. As you know, James Holt is our main character, and that's the name I chose at the beginning of the novel, some 2 years before standing over that gravesite in Harpers Ferry. In the story, as you know or will discover, Holt and Miskimon become great friends. And in real life, T.B. Miskimon returned to the United States after the canal was built, married, had 3 children. One of his sons is given the name Holt. Holt Miskimon. It's as if in some parallel universe, the story that was so real in my mind for all those months led the real T.B. Miskimon to name his son after the best friend that he discovered throughout the adventures of the novel Saffire. And for me, it was like a twilight moment. What are the odds that I'd come up with the first name Holt only to discover 2 years later that the real T.B. Miskimon used the same unusual name as a first name for his son. So if you haven't read Saffire, I hope you will give it a chance. I hope you go to the Panama Canal in 1909. I hope you'll enjoy seeing the digging of the canal through Holt's eyes. I hope you'll enjoy the friendship that builds. I hope you'll enjoy meeting Saffire, and I hope the story brings you right to the end, when we also get to meet Teddy Roosevelt in his final day in the White House.